we too have this idea that God, mainline people, that God is at the top, and people who are at the top, who will have more power, more wealth, more success, are somehow closer to God. I mean, look at who serves on the important boards of our churches. So the religious part is clear, but and this is what interests me as a theologian about economics. It seems there's a parallel to that in economics, where we have a sort of blind faith in the economic realm that functions exactly the same way. One of them is this well-known saying that goes back probably to President Kennedy, that a rising tide will lift all boats. A rising tide will lift all boats. And I'm wondering whether this is an embodiment of that sort of blind faith, whether the rising tide actually lifts all boats or whether it doesn't. Now, if you look at that empirically, if you look for the evidence, I think you can say the rising tide does not lift all boats. It hasn't done so, it hasn't performed, and it's not really looking like it's going to do that anytime soon. Actually, this is going to get worse. Or as one of my friends said to me, maybe you should talk about the rising tide lifting all yachts. that I can see happening, but lifting all boats, I don't think that's really what will happen. On the other hand, that's the sort of thing that you get taught in business school. That's the sort of thing on which a lot of then serious economic work is built. And of course, there you're not allowed to question, you're not allowed to come up with these questions whether this would be just blind faith because this is supposed to be realism, this is supposed to be objective, this is supposed to be a science versus the religious stuff. The reality is it's a lot more parallel than we think, and even some economists these days have woken up to the fact that there's literature out there now, economists writing about economics as religion. This is the title of a book, Economics as Religion, where economics, as much as it may seem a science, is ultimately closer to the way religion functions than the way science functions. Blind faith here also on the other side of the equation. And I have often wondered whether this is the problem in our own country, whether, where we have such a faith-based basis here. I mean, compare that to Europe, where people are much less interested in faith issues. But faith is so strong in religious affairs that perhaps this is what keeps us going economically. Whether there is a parallel between people who are used to blindly believing stuff religiously, whether it makes them more likely to blindly believe stuff in economics as well. They just come along and look. They're used to somebody telling them what to believe. And so whether this is your pastor on Sunday mornings or Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke from the halls of power somewhere else far away in Wall Street, may not be much of a difference. You're used to basically taking things on face value. And you're used to seeing yourself receiving pie in the sky at the end. But maybe this wealth deal, this gospel of prosperity, this idea that we'll all be rich one day, we'll all be millionaires, is just as much pie in the sky as a lot of religion is. Admittedly, a lot of religion is just that. So what do you do? I don't want to keep analyzing it. I want to propose some alternatives, some solutions to this. Maybe the first step, though, is to admit that faith is not helping here, and that perhaps investigating what's going on might be the first step beyond blind faith. And then we can ask the question, and what difference does faith make? I keep reminding people, and this is perhaps the basic thing that Christians can do, that going back to Jesus can sometimes help us, more than we think. And there's a scene in the Gospels where you have John the Baptist, after a while, getting worried whether Jesus was the right guy or not. Remember John the Baptist, who basically preached the coming of Jesus and baptized Jesus and all these things. Well, at one point, the empire puts him in prison, and from that perspective, he gets a bit worried. He says, "Are you the one who's supposed to come, or should we wait for someone else?" That encounter you get, for instance, in Matthew 11. And Jesus' answer, I think, is really crucial for us here, because Jesus could have very easily said, just believe. Shut up and believe. I am the one, of course. You heretic. Why would you raise these questions? You're not with us. If you're not with us, you're against us. That sort of answer, I think, is very common these days. If you raise religious questions, it often happens, that you're branded a heretic, or that you're branded as somebody who just doesn't believe strongly. If you raise economic questions, it's even worse. They'll call you whatever, right? Socialist, communist, somebody who doesn't feel it. You shouldn't doubt this. You shouldn't raise these questions. Now, Jesus' answer is different, because he doesn't ask for blind faith. He points to the evidence. You remember, though, Matthew 11, verses 4 and 5. Jesus' response, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them." When we're talking about healthcare, it seemed to me that that's what Jesus was talking about. Having universal healthcare and actually making a difference in people's lives. But you might think maybe this is just my own personal bias here. But what's Jesus talking about? He's talking about actual, real change in people's lives. Are you the one who's supposed to come, or should we wait? Well, look here, there's a difference. And the difference that gets made, of course, is precisely in the difference in the lives of these people that are usually forgotten by the system. He doesn't say, new palaces are built, and the rich are getting richer, and the poor will ultimately gain from it if you wait long. That's not Jesus' answer. I'm coming here to sing with the angels and bring you the kingdom of God. No, he says very, nitty-gritty stuff, right? The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised. Oh, that's a tough one. And the poor will have good news brought to them. That's evidence that something's changing. Ask these questions of your religion. Ask these questions of your economy, and maybe you're getting an answer. Is something really changing? And in Jesus' case, it seems, yes, something is indeed actually changing. Now, that could, of course, be perceived as just another gospel of success. Right? I have another recipe to make it all happen. But a bigger change seems to be at stake here. I describe it perhaps as a change that it's a radical reversal that you move from a top-down perspective that is often your basic blind faith perspective. You have faith in the top coming through, the powerful coming through, in big money coming through, in some fantasy, religious fantasy coming true. Compare that to a bottom-up perspective where you're actually looking for not the big fantasies coming through, but stuff really happening, where it's not supposed to happen. The poor having the good news preached to them, who would waste their time doing that? If you're in the business of creating a big, powerful church, or a big, powerful business, or anything, or a big, powerful theology, don't waste your time preaching the good news to the poor. You want to get the movers and the shakers. But here, it actually moves from the bottom up. And if you look at Jesus' story, it's not just that, it's not that he always keeps moving from the bottom up. It's also that there are some harsh words being said about the perspective from the top down, which is not going to save you. The powerful, the wealthy, the mighty are ultimately not going to save you. Perhaps one of the most revolutionary texts in that regard comes from someone that we have pretty much silenced in the church, which is Jesus' mother.